I couldn't go out of the ballpark without an escort. I had to stay in another hotel rather than staying in a hotel with my teammates.
Per the NCAA, Notre Dame will be on probation for the next year. The school admitting to recruiting violations from 2019. Those violations mainly stem from a now former assistant coach.
Dogs that detect COVID-19 will be there at the entrance for the limited amount of fans that will return to games starting next Thursday. About 1,500 season ticket holders. That's right, the dogs will be there. They're highly trained. Heat working with the company for months now and learning more about this ability and the training of these dogs.
It's always good to be mentioned and having an opportunity to pursue your dreams. And obviously, yes, I do want to be a head coach. But when it's all said and done with, my job is to make sure everything that we're doing right now is not to take away from the goals that we're trying to accomplish.
We're going to kick you in the teeth, all right? And when you punch us back, we're going to smile at you. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up. And then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down.
Hi, once again, everybody, and welcome in. I'm Ed Berliner, and the fastest 60 minutes in sports. Sports Pulse kicks it in once again on a Hawaiian Shirt Friday. You will notice, of course, that there is no floral on this Hawaiian shirt. Why? Simply because I like it. It's the orange color for Hawaiian Shirt Friday, so it works that way. But this time on a Friday, I did manage to let my guests know exactly what the day was. I made it optional. Good to see that they did not make it optional. They went for it. And we got a lot to do and a short time to get there. So let's go ahead and bring in my guest. First of all, my great friend for many years, and I know he's sorry about that in so many ways. It's been so tough on his life. You have seen him. You have heard him. He is national play-by-play, bowling, college football, everything else, and a hell of a dad, as I might add as well, and a dog lover. What else do you want from a guy? He's got everything. It's always a pleasure to welcome from the South Florida den, if you will, Dave LaMont joins us on the show. Mr. LaMont, how have you been?
It's also Tropical Cup Coffee Day. So just to show that I've taken this incredibly seriously. My dear friend, I'm well. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. We are getting through everything. We are getting through the frigid weather here in South Florida. Brr. I just don't we like to say that?
It's not cold enough.
We just like to say that just to get people all pissed off across the country, like the people sitting in Boston right now, where it's 22 degrees. I'd rather be
I wish
here.
it were colder here.
I want the snow. Yeah, that's just it. I want the snow, and I miss that. But soon enough to get back to skiing. Also, for the first time here on Sports Pulse, for the first time in any of my shows, I have been trying to get this guy in the air for a while, and the schedules just didn't match up, but it's okay. Now I got him. He's mine! And he's going to be a regular on the show because he has written for the Miami Herald. He writes for the Miami Herald, I should say. And we have a co-love of hockey, which is, we could sit and probably talk hockey for hours, but Mr. LaMont wouldn't like that.
No, it's okay.
Well, but you're more of a basketball guy. We'll maybe get to that. But
Wow.
I know that. Come on, basketball and a football guy. He writes for the Miami Herald. He is a brilliant writer, a brilliant commentator, and he's also a dad too. I don't know about dogs. We'll have to ask him that on Well. David Neal joins us here on Sports Pulse today. David, a dog guy or not? I've never known.
I'm more a cat person. I can have dogs. I would, if I had a dog, I would prefer like a German Shepherd or an Alaskan Wolfhound type thing.
Okay.
Irish Setter, Golden Retriever. I don't have a tropical cup. I have a Shulaville cup. I'm not sure from what restaurant this is in South Florida. It's only water, and I'm also yeah. Well, you know.
Well, you know, it's funny too because
first time on the show. Don't want to get too ragged.
I know. I keep telling people that we've got to have cocktails in these shows, but then again, some people will go, "What? You guys are drinking at noon if they're watching us on the West Coast?"
No,
but it's
this
Friday,
clearly
so why
is
not?
the first time on the show if he's drinking water. So yeah.
I do not have, and I screwed up then. I didn't get the tropical cup, but now that Dave has done that on a Friday from now on, I am going to bring in the tropical cup. You've shamed me. You've done a hell of a job. Well, again, I mean, you've managed to do it, for 30 years? You may as well go ahead and keep doing it. So therefore, gentlemen, welcome in. We had an awful lot of things to talk about. And Unfortunately, while we're going to get to college football, basketball, and so many other things, we need to talk about the passing today of Hank Aaron, that at 86 years of age still came as a shock to so many people. And there is so much to talk about with regard to Hank Aaron other than home runs. I want to go ahead and begin with this interview that was done in February of 2020 on NBC, where they sat Hank down and talked about his career. And there was a poignant moment that led into talk of his home run years and his chase for the Babe, because it came down to the Negro Leagues. And Aaron admitting that, which many of us have known, that even his teammates, when he got to the major leagues, told him, "You'll never make it. Go back to the Negro Leagues. You don't belong here." And that sets up what came years later for Hank Aaron in chasing Babe Ruth.
Yes, it was. Pressure from the players that you played with was telling you that you can't make it. You'd never make it.
Hank Aaron did make it, debuting for the Milwaukee Braves in 1954. Though he made 25 All-Star teams, Aaron continually faced obstacles white players did not, including death threats while approaching Babe Ruth's career home run record. I was surprised to read in what should have been the most exciting period of your life, you're chasing Babe Ruth's record. It wasn't.
It was not.
Why not?
I couldn't go out of the ballpark without an escort. I had to stay in another hotel rather than staying in a hotel with my teammates. It was the toughest moment of my life.
Here's the pitch.
And then it happened.
And then it happened.
There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
Runs batted in, 2,297. You're first. Extra base hits, 1,477. You're first. Years with 30 or more home runs, 15. Pretty good argument could be made that you're the greatest that's ever played baseball. What do you think?
Well, I'm with you.
Had to be the best answer ever when you consider that, and I think it's very true. When we talk about Henry Aaron, David, we have to look forward and make sure that his legacy stays together now, because when you talk about great players in baseball, this generation, the younger generation, will not talk about Henry Aaron. They won't talk about guys like Frank Robinson and so many of the other greats that were in that era. But Henry Aaron was a great, and for more than home runs, but just on the baseball field itself, it's astounding what he did, and we got to make sure that that's not forgotten.
I think anytime you are a player who is in any sport and you are excellent at one particular thing or known for one particular thing, you have to continually remind people that Michael Jordan was not just, unstoppable at the offensive end, but that he was every year of his career and, one of the 5 best defensive players in the league, and one year won the scoring title and was selected by other players as the best defensive player in the league. Similarly with Hank Aaron, he's got a couple Gold Gloves. His career batting average is higher than Willie Mays. He was very consistent for a long time. I saw somebody do a number today. If you take out his, the rookie year and like the last year with the Milwaukee Brewers, or maybe last year and a half with the Milwaukee Brewers, and the 20 years in between, he averaged 36 home runs and some other, heavy baseball analytic, numbers that are just spectacular. His 1 year he finished second in stolen bases to Maury Wills, one of the great base stealers of all time. As an all-around player, you lose that, and because he did it so consistently, without much flair, in a similar way to Frank Robinson. That I remember talking to Mike Phillips, who covered baseball for us for several years and is a few years older than me, and so much more clearly remembers this era. But he said, until Frank Robinson got traded to the Orioles in '66, there was a discussion of who is the National League All-Star outfield? Because he said, is it, you got Mays, Robinson, Clemente, and Aaron. And
just putting those four names together in itself, just thinking about the legend scope of those four players.
And he would say, and Mike would say to me, and Aaron was the one who a lot of people would leave out.
Yes.
Of those three. And so because, he didn't have Clemente or Mays' flair. And he wasn't, he never hit over 50 in a season. He didn't have the big seasons as much as Robinson did. And Robinson's a guy who's also forgotten, I think, a lot by a lot of people. He is so underrated and so forgotten, but except by people who were alive then and, saw him play. So yeah, you got to tell people now, if you're as you got to remind people, hey, it wasn't just as a home run hitter he was impressive, but he had two qualities. They always say the two best abilities, your first two abilities, availability and durability, and obviously he had that.
See, and there's a great word in there, Dave. When it comes down to durability, Aaron never took a steroid in his life. This is a guy who basically came to play at the ballpark when you had cheeseburgers and you still had dinner at home where you could, or you were eating something on the road that you barely were able to grab. And then we'll get to the social issue as well for Aaron in a minute. Mm-hmm. But this is a guy who was knocking balls out of the park at amazing lengths, great power, and he wasn't this bulked up, massive guy who would knock out in the gym for hours at a time. He's just a ball player, natural talent.
Well, the approach was different then. You didn't really look at year-round workouts like they do now. You're also talking about an era where nobody was suspicious of what the baseball was made up of. It's really funny. I consider social media both a blessing and a curse, and too often it's a curse. But the odd thing is, in listening to David, I think the legacy of Aaron's going to come shining through, oddly enough, thanks to social media. Because you're already seeing so many tributes that are being put out and so many highlights and so many reminders of the social, which we're going to talk about and which you play there, and in addition to his considerable abilities. And in the fact that you mentioned the steroid era, and I mentioned the possibility of the balls being a little bit different, and yet he still is the all-time RBI king. He is still the all-time extra base leader. And in some people's minds, he still owns the home run record, depending on where you land on that. That says a lot about his consistency, because today offense is more than it usually is. And today it's either home run or strikeout. The extra base hit and playing the game that it was played 40, 50 years ago, it's all changed because everything's big or go home. So his legacy is extremely secure as a ball player. And I think today it's just going to be enhanced by the many tributes. Plus, another aspect of it that's extraordinarily unfortunate is he's just the latest in a number of heroic figures in baseball history in the last year who have passed. Oh, yeah. Either as all the pitchers, with Gibson and Seaver and Whitey Ford and now Don Sutton just a few days ago, all of them Hall of Famers. It brings baseball to the forefront in a very bad way, but it also reminds people of what this game was.
We need to talk about the social. No, Dave, go ahead. David, go ahead.
No, I finished the Hank Aaron obit. My dad sent me the Hank Aaron obit from the Washington Post. I finished that and I was reminded of what Dave said. It's like, wait a minute. There's Gibson. There's Sutton. There's Joe Morgan. I was a Reds fan. Joe Morgan was my guy on that.
These are the guys we grew up with. This was exactly my era in baseball. Every day I turn around and I say, my God, this is a guy that I rooted for. When Seaver died, I cried. He was the first player that I idolized.
And Dave just, as Dave just listed Seaver, I was like, oh my goodness, I'd forgotten about Seaver. And also, this was an interesting era of baseball, because you could argue in some ways it was the sort of a peak, because you have the color barriers falling, and your best athletes at that time still gravitated toward baseball, even if they were multi-sport athletes, like Jackie Robinson or Bob Gibson. They still gravitated toward baseball. And, you had a little bit of expansion, and you suddenly had this great influx of talent from Latin America, from the what once went to the Negro Leagues is now coming up through the farm system into the major leagues. And so you can kind of argue there was about a 15-year span, 20-year span, where despite baseball losing traction nationally, that last generation that rose up with baseball as, its king sport, that was as good as baseball ever was. And, those players from that era are, sadly leaving us as the way of all flesh.
And it was an era where it was an era where teams weren't buying their way to a pennant either. And if they were, we didn't really know about it. Maybe we were too young. But until the Yankees started to just start doing this, and other teams were forced to follow suit, to David's comment, this era predates that. Nowadays it's you couldn't keep the big red machine together nowadays. You couldn't have Perez and Rose and Concepcion and Morgan and all of those guys together, and Dan Dreesen later on and so forth. And so, Bernie Carbo, they're all solid players, some of them Hall of Famers. I said, if I had to have somebody get a hit to save my life, I'd pick Joe Morgan. That's how great I thought he was.
Much.
And that's including the guys like Brett and all the other hitters that would come after him or those who preceded him.
Well, there was a crafty nature of the ball player then, because in that era, you're right, where they would work. Here's something you don't hear a lot in baseball. We can go off on this for hours, but working the count. And I was told this by some people who coach and manage and play the game today, where there are very few who know how to work the count and work the pitcher. And a guy like Aaron was one of those guys. And Morgan especially. Morgan could work the count. And these guys could do it. They were, to me, more artists than they were athletes with simply the way they played. And again, it was much more of a rougher era. I mean, certainly these guys, weren't first-class flyers. They ate in rotten places with bad food, and it wasn't like the Taj Mahals they have today to play baseball in. It was a very different era. And I think that has to bring us forward then to the social reason and the social legacy of Hank Aaron. I guarantee you that there are people now in their 20s, 30s, maybe even their 40s, who would hear Hank Aaron talk about the abuse that was heaped upon him, not only in the Negro Leagues, but coming out of the Negro Leagues by his own teammates. And they would go, no, come on, that really didn't happen. That's revisionist history. They wouldn't understand it. And I think that it behooves us as historians in so many ways to make sure that the current generation and future generations understand his impact was not just baseball, but social in what he meant to the African American community across America. We can't forget that.
In 1957, as he's winning MVP and the Milwaukee Braves are winning the World Series, that's also the same year we have the scenes out of Arkansas, out of Little Rock's, as they're integrating Little Rock High. You have troops there as they're integrating Little Rock High. Hank Aaron comes out of Mobile, Alabama, comes out of the South. He plays in Jacksonville, and while coming up, what you kind of have to do to make people realize this is that you kind of just have to juxtapose it with here's what's going on outside the locker room. Here's what's going on in the rest of the world, and it's not all of a sudden like these players, came from some distant planet or something. These were players from all over. They came from the North. They came from the South. They came from the West. And they came from, they came with their beliefs and their ideas. And and you had managers like, my goodness, you had, managers. You're talking people who were born at the time, born in the time of the early 1900s. Well, what do you expect from your average white American born in the early 1900s? What do you think that mindset is?
Sure, these were guys who were in their late 50s, early 60s. It's what they grew up with. That's no excuse, but however, that is the generational concept here.
And so that's how you explain to people, look, this is how you have to explain to people, this is what they were dealing with. This is what they were all dealing with. All the first run of black players, dark Latin players also.
Mm-hmm.
All those guys were dealing with, Bob Gibson in his autobiography, which I have, he was constantly being told by one guy, one manager, that he would never make it. No. I teach you more pitches, but you can't handle it. Everybody, these are supposed to be the guys who are trying to help you get to, go farther and improve as a player. And, they look at you as less than a human being.
There it is. And I think that's the point. Less than a human being, which we've got to push forward here, Dave, because, again, we're in an era where we're realizing a lot of the bad that happened, and the Negro Leagues are finally getting the due that they have deserved for so long. But there's still a faction, I believe, in sporting America in general, not just sports, that when we talk to it, as Dave just said, go back to the 50s, go back to what happened, go back to the prejudice, the rampant hate that was going on at that time. They couldn't believe it. No, Hank Aaron was a ball player. Come on. And we got to make sure that my point is, I guess we have to make sure that doesn't disappear. That's got to stay at the forefront of the conversation.
I would like to say that it will. In some cases, it won't. And to be honest with you, it sounds almost like a fairy tale when you go through some of those stories, as if, that's just a movie. Yeah. I sawe saw that movie with about the ball player who wore the 42. That was fiction, right? We know it wasn't, and we know that what they went through. I mean, look at what the approach of Babe Ruth was like. Here you are, a hallowed record, maybe the most hallowed in American sports, and you couldn't really enjoy the pursuit. That was in the 70s. Imagine now. Today it probably would be a little bit different because thered be a ton of pressure from a media point of view and maybe not as much racist hatred directed toward him. But at that era, yeah, and Babe Ruth was an icon. Far from a perfect person in any way, if you read about him. But it was difficult for some people to deal with. And in some cases, it still is difficult to deal with. I think it's jobs of people like us to remind everyone that it wasn't just going up there and taking a cheesy fastball over the left field fence and going on to your charter flight and your 5-star Four Seasons hotel in that era. It was as you mentioned, Ed, it was different. The quality of play, the athletes are better today. The ball players in a lot of ways are better today. They're stronger. They're faster. I get all of that. But the game is somewhat different. I think it was probably played better in that era than it is right now for the most part. But again, I turn to the lessons that we're going to get from this, I hope, with Aaron. And thank you for bringing up Bob Gibson because, there was a time when black men were considered not even intelligent enough to pitch. Like the black men weren't intelligent enough to play linebacker. Until slowly but surely in the later 60s, that started to change in the AFL first, and then slowly in the NFL. There was all of this prejudice that black athletes had to overcome, and it was chipped away at that block of hatred slowly. But yeah, it was there, and Aaron to concentrate and to deliver as he did. And other great black ball players, because I'm sure Willie Mays went through it. We know he did. We know when Jackie Robinson has been discussed, is utterly remarkable because it's hard enough to play baseball as it is halfway decently, and to do it at the Aaron level is an achievement that very few men could ever do.
I was lucky enough to get to know Rachel Robinson at a stage when I was doing a lot of national interviews. And to have her tell the stories, I mean, I didn't get, Jack had passed years prior, but to hear in the emotion in her voice, the passion in her voice, the fear that you can grasp that she had to live through with Jack, and you can't not be moved by something like that, which is why, while Aaron, to me, Aaron is still the home run king. We'll get to that in a second. But that opens up a whole new can of worms. But I would like to see his first and foremost memory be that of a man who truly was right next to Jackie Robinson as a standard bearer in America. To me, that would be more.
remember that, when the Braves moved to Atlanta, that's your first major league team in what we think of as the South.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
St. Louis was as far south, and there are people who tell you St. Louis is a southern city. Cincinnati is it's been called the northernmost southern city, and they were no princes on that team. But they moved to Atlanta in '66. Aaron wasn't terribly pleased. He's like, "Whoa, I'm from the South. I now, Milwaukee, I go where I want.
I know what's coming. I know what's next."
Right. And Atlanta, not so much. And also, what is happening at the same time? Martin Luther King's trying to gear up his Poor People's Campaign. You've got, Malcolm X has just been assassinated. You got the Vietnam War going on. We talk about the fabric of America today and how divided it is. There were so many things back then in that year, tearing the fabric of America, so many different ways. And here they are going back to Atlanta, and he's the best player. He's the guy. And
right.
So that to be.
Hey, I'll throw this in here right now. People who live in this era and all we talk about what's going on right now. Go back to the 60s in a time capsule for a minute. If you think this is bad, go back to the 60s and see what happened then, my friend.
Well, I mean, you mentioned 66. We're 3 years removed from losing a president. We are 2 years removed from the June that's going to see the year that's going to see both the presidential candidate and Dr. King, who were assassinated within 2 months of each other. The city of Detroit's about to go up in flames, and some would say it's never recovered from that.
Kent State.
We had Kent State, 4 killed there. My dad was working in Washington, D.C. at the time at the FAA, and he would tell me that, when they rioted in Washington, D.C., people would just lay down in front of his car at a red light. And this is long before they have a train system there. And he would wait. He wasn't a radicalized person in any way. And he would just wait until they get up, or somebody, maybe a policeman, would move them. I mean, that was the era in which I grew up in, and I watched some of it as a kid. But even as a kid, you couldn't help but be affected by it, and couldn't help it. It does have an imprint on my brain of what some of that went through. And you can't ever forget anything like that, and you can only hope that it would, slowly but surely get better. And I guess in some ways it has, but in some ways it hasn't.
Exactly. Let's go ahead, David. I'll give you the last word on Hank.
Here's Aaron not only goes in as a star at Atlanta, but he becomes a fixture in Atlanta.
Exactly.
Which is Dr. King's Dr. King's, but he becomes a fixture there and he becomes a member of the Braves organization. Like he becomes an iconic figure in the Braves organization, in this place where he was very hesitant to go to, and for obvious reasons. And so, I mean, that's another part of, his whole thing. He was an executive with the Braves when there were no black executives in baseball, and not exactly like it's teaming with it now. But, but again, I think part of it is because he is low key. He's consistent.
Well, that was just it. He was always so low key about it. He didn't, as friends told me, and I knew about Hank a little, he didn't look to make waves. He said, I can do it quietly. And
right.
That's the way he approached it. He was very much in that era and that thinking process that I don't have to scream. And
right.
I think he made more impact by not screaming. And he was a quiet leader. There were some people, and I remember there's a lot of stories where they wanted Hank to be more vocal. They wanted him to get out there. They wanted him to get in front of the cameras and scream and lead marches and be part of this. And Aaron said, no, that's not my job. This is what I do, and this is how I lead. And I think that in many ways, he kept the temperature down to a simmer where it didn't explode in some ways, certainly in Atlanta. And I think he needs to get credit for that as well.
If you're going to move any cause forward, you need your sword swingers, and then you need the people who are maybe a little more pacifist, and you need the people who are somewhere in between, who are ready to fight, but they aren't going to yell and scream about it. They're going to push forward. They're going to be there with you, but they're going to be that.
They will still be there and be part of the overall effort.
Right.
That's really what it is.
Yeah, but you need all types if you're
Right.
going to any movement. If you're going to move things forward, progressing any kind of movement.
Okay, let's move on to a lot of other things because I'm looking at the clock. We're halfway through the show already. And I got a gob of things that I want to get to here because I don't get a chance to get two guys like you together in the same place at the same time. So we got to do this. Now, working off the baseball thinking, there again is a tremendous amount of discussion about Hall of Fame and who's in and who's out. And I'm looking at the numbers. And every year, there's the voting incrementally comes up for Bonds, incrementally comes up for Clemens. It's like things are buried a little bit in the past. The Hall of Fame and the cases for Bonds and Clemens come down to this. First of all, as I said, Hank Aaron's the home run champion. To me, it's not Barry Bonds. He cheated to get there, so I don't put him in there. That's my personal opinion. But for these two guys, we're back at that same argument again, gentlemen. It's neither one of them were convicted of anything. If you go back and read the book and you talk about Bonds and Clemens, you'll find a lot of information that they took a lot of juice and they did a lot of things that were against baseball's rules. But people are saying, well, you didn't convict them of anything, and it's off the field. You can't hold that to them in the Hall of Fame. But in my opinion, what you do off the field, it affected what they did on the field. So I don't believe either one of them belong in the Hall of Fame, end of story. But the voters, I think eventually, Dave, eventually the voters are going to put him in. I think it's an inevitability.
Maybe through fatigue, maybe through years. I mean, this is not a ballot that just blows you away.
No.
If you look at the ballot, there's not anybody we go, well, he's in. Other years it's extremely simple. And I think those are the years that hurt them because the people who sit on the fence, I think there are some people who are just tired of it and they've just said, you know what, the hell with it. Let's just let him in. I'm going to vote for him. The numbers are there. They were great players, which they both were. But I think to your point, Ed, what they did off the field in this case did affect the product on the field. It not only affected them, it affected the players they played against. And the rule was fairly simple. It's the same thing with Pete Rose. The damn rule was in a sign in the clubhouse. Don't gamble on baseball. I don't care if you bet on $1 million on your team to win. You're not supposed to do it while you're an active player. So I don't have this, canoe full of tears for this guy or for any of these guys.
Or for any of them. Thank you.
Well, right. If they get in, it won't bother my enjoyment of the game. My life will go on. I won't like it. And I think you could, it would also help if they would just admit it. Look at the love for Andy Pettitte. All right. Here's a guy who I think a lot of people were first off surprised he did it. Then he did do it, admitted it, and he got the warmest, longest embrace you could have imagined. Mark McGwire is kind of say, yeah. Well, look at him. He's back in baseball as a coach.
Sure.
And warmly accepted in the game. And he's always going to have that. But still, he's around. He's employed in baseball. So I think that's another thing, too. You could really go a long way by just saying, you know what? I know it's been a while, and I should have said this earlier, and I am sorry. That might even help get some more votes.
Well, and this comes down to what I've always said for a long time, and this comes down to Pete Rose and so many others. If you want to put them in the Hall of Fame, okay, let's get him in. Pete Rose goes in the Hall of Fame, and his plaque reads that he was banned from baseball. Here's why he was banned from baseball. Here's everything he said and did where he lied years on end before he was let in. Barry Bonds is in. Here's the evidence of him using steroids. Here's the evidence of his cheating. Clemens, you get in too. Here's the evidence on your plaque. If you're going to get in the Hall of Fame, I think because it affected the game and you being in the game, David, it has to mean that it's got to be on your plaque and you've got to be honest for the rest of time. Period.
I think.
I love that. There's David's waiting on this one.
I'm with him.
I mean, it's not as easy as that for me. I look at the type of the player Bonds and Clemens, were before we think they were using, and those were Hall of Fame careers. if you cut that off, if you just cut it off there. And another thing is that hurts Bonds and Clemens. Let's be real. You got a bunch of baseball writers, media, sports writers, of which I was one for decades, and and you have two guys. Clemens not so much, but Bonds was infamously, kind of to the media.
Oh, Bonds was a jackass. Come on, let's get right. He was a jackass. He was a pain in the ass. He hated the media. The time I covered him, and I was in San Francisco for a summer doing talk shows, doing radio talk out there, and I got to be close to Barry Bonds and the whole thing out there. He was, how shall I put that? He was a phallic symbol for what cooks in sports these days and for athletes.
Okay.
Be honest.
Yeah. I have read this. I have heard this from others. I did not personally experience this.
Okay,
so
fair.
And so I guarantee you that does affect, that affects the view on them.
But it shouldn't. I mean, if that's his worst thing that he does criminally, is he's an ass to the media.
But it does.
How many players have we walked against where they've been jerks to us? Everywhere.
I guarantee if he were great with the media, if he were Martin Brodeur, so we're gonna to pull that up. If he were Marty Brodeur with the media, he'd be in. But yes. They would both be in. You're right. What they did affected not only their own numbers and the game and the results, it affected other players' individual numbers in a sport we, love to deal. We've always loved to deal in the individual players' numbers. And Dave said, if he preferred they not in, but if they get in, it's not going to lose sleep. There's a part of me that says I want them in just because I don't want to hear this anymore. But,
yeah.
Bravo. If they're not in, okay, fine. You know what? But let's.
I want to get rid of the Pete Rose argument because for radio talk show people, every time, and Dave knows this as well as anybody else, when you're doing the radio talk show and the phones aren't lighting up, what do you do? Well, what do we do? Oh, bring up Pete Rose and throw it out there. Bang! Phones go crazy, and all of a sudden we've got something that holds people for hours. And it's the same thing on Facebook and social media. Yes, I want to get rid of this argument. Walk away from it.
You got to go home and take about a 5-hour shower when you're done with that argument. But yeah,
you do. Every time.
You cheated yourself that day. You didn't help. You didn't advance the cause of humanity when you do that sort of thing. But I don't know. I don't like it. I'm with you, Ed. I'm an Hank Aaron home run king guy all the way. And yes, I think human nature on your voting sometimes does affect it. Look at Curt Schilling. A lot of people don't like Curt Schilling. There's a pretty good case you can make for him being a Hall of Fame pitcher, especially his postseason work was very, very good. And I'm not just talking about wearing, having that sock and playing through
Which
pain.
was a lie.
Well, anyway.
It was a lie. Take it from one who was there and covered them that season.
Okay. So did he not have the surgery, or?
Sure, he had the surgery, but the whole bloody sock thing that the stitches broke open and that all the attendant run about it, that it was, oh, look what he's doing. Come on, it's ridiculous. It wasn't that bad. He could have taken the sock off at any time and just jumped and taken it off in between innings. What he left it in there. It became a dramatic moment where it wasn't that affected. And this whole bloody sock thing, talk to the people who covered the Red Sox who were there. They will tell you that it was a wonderful fairy tale more than anything else.
So are you saying that it was like wrestling and he cut himself on purpose?
No, he didn't cut himself.
And then on a determined signal, he reaches down.
I have no evidence of that.
Like a guy gigs his forehead. It's the same thing, Dusty Rhodes would... Say that for Ed. That's the finale of the show. Don't end on no. We still got time. All right,
I have no evidence of that. I have no evidence that he cut himself. I have no evidence that he didn't. But that's another story altogether. He's another one, and this is the whole Hall of Fame argument. I don't know if I want a guy in the Hall of Fame. Here we go, off the field. Curt Schilling dumped. I got the numbers. He dumped $115 million that he had made. He lost everything in this video game company in Rhode Island where he basically shafted the people of Rhode Island and the taxpayers. They'll never see all of their money back from this. It was a Ponzi scheme, and Schilling knew it. And not only that, I don't want to go too far on this, but the guy's a bad guy. That's just my opinion.
No, that's what I have heard. I've never dealt with him, but I've heard the same thing.
Well, but a bad guy publicly in some of the things that he has said that we can record. And I don't want him in the Hall of Fame, but okay. The Hall of Fame, is it supposed to be Puritan for nothing more than angels and people who wear white robes and then walk around with halos? No. As somebody's pointed out on the instant message here as we're doing the show, Ty Cobb was a guy who sharpened his spikes, went in and wanted to kill people.
Very bad guy. Yeah, I know. I think David is the only one who walks around in white robes with a halo, which he can.
So where do we draw that line?
Yeah.
See, to me, you've got to draw the line eventually. You've got to take a stand. And I think that Schilling is one of the guys that you have to take a stand and say, okay, we go from here, we move forward.
All right. I don't know. I like the NFL's way of thinking. The NFL Hall of Fame voting is, you are just supposed to consider what this guy was like on the field, of what he did on the field. Now, obviously, if what he did off the field affects on the field, that's something different. But like somebody during the Lawrence Taylor discussion, somebody tried to bring up, well, this guy, he did this, and they're like, no, don't care. Don't care.
Right.
It's Lawrence Taylor. Let's talk about Lawrence Taylor, football player, and then that ended that discussion. Kurt Schilling's got. Yeah,
Kurt Schilling's a bad guy.
It's a messy discussion. It really is, because you bring politics into it whether you want to or not, and you try to bring in the baseball, and I don't either. But it's happening, and you know that.
Yes.
Because the people who
I'll take politics out of it. I got no problem with someone who is. I'm slightly left of center myself politically. I'm moderate to left. I got no problem with somebody. I didn't have no problem with somebody being a John Birch Society member if they are a great player. Now, if they've got some, criminal stuff, looking at him.
Well, but see, that's the point I make about Schilling. Schilling is a guy out there who everybody knows, and the state of Rhode Island has already called him on it with a Ponzi scheme where he was out there to do nothing more than to take the taxpayers' money and make himself rich. Well, he torched it, and the state of Rhode Island is still never going to get the money back. So in that sense, just on that point alone, I don't want him in the Hall of Fame. To me, that's just the wrong message you send. But he wasn't wearing a uniform when he did it. So, okay. On to the NFL. I wanted to make sure we talked about this because there is the issue of Eric Bieniemy, I think, must be discussed in depth. Let me begin by this bit from the Dan Patrick Show, which was on the 18th of January, where he was speaking with Louis Riddick, who's a former NFL safety. And these were the comments that Patrick made and that Riddick made, and I think this sets up the Bieniemy conversation perfectly.
I was told this 2 weeks ago by a source. Don't be surprised if Eric Bieniemy does not get a head coaching job. Now there's two openings, Louis. What am I missing here with Eric Bieniemy? And it looks like Leslie Frazier might be the leading candidate with Houston, and then we have Philadelphia.
I think what you have is, look, human beings are making these decisions, and human beings engage in confirmation bias all the time. And right now, for some reason, and I don't really want to go down this rabbit hole to the point where, we make this into a racial discussion, but for some reason, all these things, all these different excuses keep coming up about Eric, whether it be he doesn't interview well, or are there things in his past that cause you to press pause, in terms of his accountability and leadership and his dependability going forward, which are just BS. And Andy has talked about so many different times that it's just ridiculous to even bring up at this point. But I think that's what's happening. Then, of course, there's the whole he doesn't call plays. Well, you know what? I've talked to Andy enough times about this in Brett Veach to say that, look, the amount of responsibility that they put on him is the same, if not more, than the responsibility that Andy gave to both Doug and Matt Nagy. So I would hope like hell that this is not simply about, the whole, being comfortable with hiring people who don't necessarily look like you, have the same experiences as you, and you still have those kind of hang-ups and have those kind of reservations that would keep you from hiring a young coach like him, a relatively young coach like him, who has coached one of the greatest players we've seen come into this league ever, and who vouches for him without pause.
He's an offensive coordinator who's got a championship team under his belt. Doesn't have
Has
any
a
problems.
ring.
Has a ring, which says something, certainly. Doesn't have problems that would stop him from being a coach, certainly. And he's not a head coach in the NFL. And I think Dan Patrick asks the good question. What am I missing?
It's amazing to me that we're having this discussion in 2021.
Fair.
The bottom line in the NFL, to me, I realize it is a business, but these franchises are doing rather well. Nobody's poor who owns an NFL team. To me, the bottom line is winning, and you bring in the people who are winners, and Eric Bieniemy has proven to be a winner. And when I hear the Eagles hire somebody who, honest to God, look, I follow football. I don't know who this guy is. I still actually do not remember the name of the new Eagles coach. It's someone I have literally never heard of. That doesn't mean he won't succeed. I have to be fair to him. But it just blows me away that here we are having this discussion, and what is the problem? As Patrick said, what am I missing? And Louis Riddick is exactly right. Don't tell me he can't interview. Maybe your first interview you do kind of mess it up. That's for a lot of people looking for a job. But Eric Bieniemy has had interviews, multiple interviews, and I don't think that he's unprepared or doesn't do his work about the franchise that he's about to meet. There is an element to this that is ugly, and it is unnecessary. I hope that there will be a team that's going to go ahead and give him the opportunity he deserves. Andy Reid assistants have done well.
Yes.
Andy Reid is highly regarded amongst his peers as not just as a coach, but as a man. And I don't doubt that if Andy Reid hires you, that's a guy that you're going to want to work for, and that you're going to learn a lot from a guy like that. And so, yeah, it's puzzling and it's frustrating.
And as an old radio guy in South Florida said a million years ago, Nick Sirianni, the head coach of the Eagles, never stole the freight train. Never stole the freight train, and he's probably got the chops to go ahead and be a head coach. But
he never stole a freight train, but Ed, I believe Kurt Schilling did.
Kurt Schilling stole a state's worth of freight trains from people at like 115 million plus. But
anyway, sorry to do that, but I couldn't resist.
Okay, it was too good. Neal would be very happy that you said that too, that you put it in there. So, David, from that aspect, I think I'm a little bit like Riddick here. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but you've got to. That rabbit hole is right there. Why isn't he hired?
Who are kidding? Let's head down that rabbit hole. Let's look. If there is something that's known in the football world that isn't known to the general populace, or known, generally, I would think that would have gotten out by now.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, what? I really don't. Look. Let's face it. There are still people. They're still hiring. Going with who they feel they know.
No, let's be honest. Let's say it out loud.
They're still. It's still white. Mainly white guys. Hiring. With perception issues, with perception problems, with racist perceptions, and I don't. I'll take a little bit off Barbie by saying I would not be surprised if there's not that many black executives anymore. There's no Ozzie Newsome kind of, moved upstairs, and he's had John Harbaugh forever. There were a couple more 10 years ago. I just think I think everybody is kind of affected by some of those racist perceptions.
See, and I'm gonna go to one thing that I've been told, and I've been told this by several people in several organizations over several years. I'll just kind of say that because I want to make sure to give it as broad a brush as possible, because it's not like it was said to me here in the last 10 minutes or the last 10 days. It's been said for a while. with regard to this type of hiring, the hiring of African Americans. I have been told by people, well, the coach really knows this person and coached at this organization and coached at this college, and he really only knows white guys are his friends. The white guys are his friends, and that's who he hangs out with. So he's friendly with them, and he knows their families, and he knows he spent a lot of time with them. To which, every time I hear that, my answer is a frank bullshit. I mean, so you're telling me that just because you're friends with somebody, you aren't hiring somebody because they're good at their job? That, to me, is an even bigger indictment of anything else.
Well,
what you're saying here is,
you
I just hang out with a bunch of white guys, so I don't know anything else about what happens with the Hispanic or the black community. Come on, this is nonsense.
There's also this problem in college football, too.
Yes.
And it is absolutely a coaching network in college and pro sports where I know him, he knows him, this guy coached with me back here.
Right.
I know this guy from this guy and this guy. So there is, you mentioned comfort, there is going to be that. And it's very difficult for somebody to bust through there. And so you end up having like almost a backlog of minority assistant coaches, but nobody or very few people at either the collegiate or the NFL level are willing to take someone out who seems to be eminently qualified. And I do believe that the pressures on these minority coaches are worse. Let me offer you up Charlie Strong as an example in Texas. When they hired Charlie Strong for Texas, there were boosters who were undercutting him from the second he stepped into Mac Brown's old office. And not only did Charlie have to deal with trying to get the program in his image, but he also had to deal with outside forces that were against him. And the program did suffer, and he lost his job. Would he have lasted longer had he been a white coach? We can't answer that. We can suspect the answer is yes, but no one's going to say this kind of thing. So I think, and David's got a great point. Now, Washington just hired a black executive, Martin Mayhew, as their new general manager. He had experience in D.C. before. He's been around the league a little bit. Slowly but surely, I think is the only way when you get more people in power who can make these decisions who are minorities, it's going to help.
What I'm going to...
I have a story about...
Go ahead.
That's been like 13 years ago. I asked, is the Rooney Rule, is it now obsolete? And we were talking to Rick Wilson, I think that was his name, Rick Wilson, Rick Smith in Houston, GM, Ozzie Newsome, Herm Edwards. And it was interesting how there was a little bit of a split. There were people who were like, you know what, it's still necessary to just get guys experience and get their faces out there and get them known. There were others who felt, you know what, if a team's going to cut down the talent pool like that, forget them. Then you know what, let them suffer and let them do what the Dolphins were doing right at that time. We're just coming out of right at that time. Let them pick Cam Cameron and leave Mike Tomlin off because he's too big. Let them do that. Or the other feeling was, hey, we're rolling in the right direction. We're pretty good. And the only people I talked to were black GMs, black executives, and black coaches. And they were split on whether the Rooney Rule was still necessary. This was 13 years ago. It was one of my favorite stories I've worked on because I just thought I loved the answers I got.
Look, I think what we're dealing in here, and we're definitely going to go over our fastest 60 minutes in sports because I'm not leaving this conference. This is really too good, and this needs to be talked about here. I think what we're dealing in here with the NFL and with sports in general is a societal issue as well that we have to look at because we have, and let's be very frank, we have white executives who will hire white people. We have women executives who will hire women executives. We have Hispanic executives who will hire Hispanic executives. No matter what it is, we have a schism in this country where it comes down to color and race, where you are more comfortable with going immediately to the one that you know, to the community that you know, to the people that you know, instead of expanding it into people who are eligible, who are worthy for the opportunity, who have worked their ass off, regardless of race, creed, color, sex, to be the person you want to hire for your organization. And I think it's football, I think it's baseball, I think it's every sport, and I think it's society, certainly, where we have people who will stay within their comfort zone because it's the people I know, it's the people I hang out with, it's the people that are my friends. That's got to stop. And I think, gentlemen, until it stops in a social sense, I don't think it's going to stop in a sports sense.
Another thing, but one thing about a minority or a female executive in areas where white males have tended to dominate, they might feel a responsibility to, you know, they might be sitting there thinking, if I don't give a shot to someone who looks like me, or, you know, has the same genitalia, or has the same sexual preference, whatever, if I don't give that person the same shot, who will? And also, they're you know, not just who will, but that if I don't give that person a shot, somebody else is going to look and say, well, heck, she interviewed with the woman, you know, she interviewed with the woman vice president over there and she didn't get hired. So, you know.
Well, that's just it. Do we need to understand that we need to be the society that says, look, I'm going to look at the best people for the job. But we need to realize that in many instances, there are people who need to move a little bit towards the front of the line, because we have had this inequity in America for so many years. But at the same breath, we've got to look outside our comfort zone. We got to look at it. And I think what's happening here, and I think Riddick's bringing up a good point, is there are many in pro football franchises who are not looking past that comfort zone. And that's why they bring in a guy like Sirianni. And again, I'm not saying that he's a bad coach or he's a bad guy, but it again comes out to, where are we making our decisions and what are we basing them on? And I think that it's societal and sports as well.
Just look at the Lions. I mean, for Pete's sake, the Lions fired Jim Caldwell, and who I believe had a winning record there.
He did. He was winning games, yes.
They were with Matt Patricia, a Belichick assistant. Belichick assistants do not have a good track record, which, by the way, that stretches across Melvin, Romeo Crennel, and Charlie Wise.
Sure.
And Josh Daniels, and now Matt Patricia. And so, and then in their next breath, they go with Dan Campbell, who, okay, I mean, really?
Well, but look, we can make a case for Campbell, and we can make one here momentarily, because Campbell was at least a player for the Lions, so he understands the culture and he understands the city.
He was a interim coach down here with the Dolphins, and you know that was 5 years ago. Maybe he's learned a lot since then. I'm not going to discount him just because he was inexperienced, thrown into a situation, and showed himself to be a little bit meatheady.
And he stunk the joint up.
A little.
He stunk the joint up. Let's be honest.
Well, they had a bad team. I mean, they had a bad team.
Yeah, exactly. And it was. But I'm going to say, I'm not going to say that he didn't learn in 5 years. I don't know the man. I don't know what he's done. So maybe he has learned in 5 years. But still, you kind of look at that and go, really? And you're leaving Bieniemy over there on the table?
Couple things. I mean, Detroit's front office has changed. They brought in Chris Spielman, who is not a meathead. I know Chris casually, but he is a football guy, and Campbell kind of represents that mentality. Get up and hit something in the morning, get up and hit something at night, don't sleep because it's football season.
Go ahead and bite somebody in the knee.
Well, yeah. And Campbell has been most recently in New Orleans with Sean Payton. That's probably not a bad classroom to be in. That's a winning franchise with some good leadership there. So let's see what happens. Was I surprised? Yeah, I really was surprised. And then he does this rather, some people love this press conference. Others are like,
okay, hang on a sec. While you're there, Dave, we just happen to, because we're really good on pre-production here, we happen to have a little bit of that and a report from Fox 17 in Detroit.
There certainly has been a lot of hesitancy from Lions fans regarding the hire of Dan Campbell as the next head coach, but I can tell you from today's introductory press conference, and yes, it is only a press conference, but his energy was contagious, and he truly understands the city of Detroit and the franchise and what they've been through for the past several decades.
I wanted this job. I wanted to be here, man. I think this is a special place because I know this. When we bring a winner to this city, It's going to be something we can all be proud of.
Campbell understands what the Lions franchise has been through since he played for them back in the mid-2000s, including the winless season back in 08.
I don't blame you fans one bit. I get it, man. You've seen these. There's no telling how many of these press conferences you've seen. I'm not going to stand up here and give you coach speak, but I'm going to tell you this, man. This team is going to freaking take on your identity, all right? There's been enough hard times here, and you always found a way back up.
Campbell's transparency stood out right away when he took the podium, saying he won't make any guarantees, but his team will certainly play hard.
I can sit up here and give you coach speak all day long. I can give you, hey, we're going to win this many games. I can't. None of that matters, and you guys don't want to hear it anyway. You've had enough of that. So, excuse my language.
Campbell served as the tight ends coach and assistant head coach for the New Orleans Saints and served also as the interim head coach for the Miami Dolphins back in 2015. But he admits he needs to find the right coaches to put around him in Detroit.
I'm going to put the right coordinators in place. I'm going to put the right staff together with those coordinators. All right, they're going to be the right mix, the right balance that complement who I am.
And he wasn't shy about wanting his players to play with a chip on their shoulder.
We're going to kick you in the teeth. All right. And when you punch us back, we're going to smile at you. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off. All right. And we're going to stand up. And then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing. That's going to be the mentality.
Campbell says he's now ready to get to work on finding his staff and collaborating with new general manager Brad Holmes on the next steps.
And as soon as I get out of here, I'm taking this jacket and this tie off. I'm putting on my Lions gear and I'm going to work.
This is nothing new to Lions fans. Of course, it was only an introductory press conference, but a lot of media members that have been covering this team for several years, some even decades, say this was one of the best introductory press conferences they have heard. Now, time will only tell if that turns into wins for the Lions in the long run. Zach Herrick, Fox 17 News.
I don't care what he does from here on out. I love the press conference. I want to put that in a time capsule right there and tell every coach to be just like that. I want to hear somebody say we're going to bite your kneecap off. Yeah!
Well, that press conference is either going to be his epitaph or the top of his resume.
Sure.
If he ends up going someplace else. Look, he's saying all the right things, and what's the classic cliche? You only get one chance to make a first impression. Right. So for the most part, he's made a positive first impression. He became kind of a local legend down here because of that attitude in his interim days with the Dolphins, because it is football. So people love to see that kind of I don't care, light me on fire, I don't give a damn, I'm going to knock you down kind of approach to the game, as opposed to somebody who's going to intellectualize football. And what will happen is if he fails, they'll bring in a guy who's exactly the opposite, and they'll bring in a player. Well, actually, he's supposed to be a player's coach.
Neal is chomping at something over here. I don't know what he's doing, but he's biting at the bit here. I'm
letting him. It's kind of like I'm boiling water for my spaghetti. I'm letting him boil a little bit longer before he goes over the edge of the pot. It was certainly an odd hire, considering that I think a lot of people interviewed for that gig, and it's a tough situation to be in. But again, what's the name of the Eagles coach? I still can't get it. Was he in The Sopranos? Who is this guy?
Come on, I want every coach from now on to be like this. David, come on, he's a hockey coach, for crying out loud. It's a good thing, man. Get in there, beat somebody up.
Every time he is exactly the dream of, and I'm of course screwing this up now for screw the camera up here.
Yeah, you did. You had a little too much fun. Get back in camera. Move to your right. There you go. There you go. We want to see that mug.
No, the other right. The other right.
There you go. The right. There you go. You're right. You're right. Over here.
Every fans love that. Fans love that. Oh, yes. I want my coach to be.
And why not? Look, Detroit. The people in Detroit, they've had teams that suck out loud for how long? Give them what they want.
What they forget. Jim Caldwell wasn't like that. He's a pretty good coach. Tony Dungy's not like that.
Playoffs under Caldwell. Playoff team. Bill Walsh. Well, that's why I was doing this. That was Bill Walsh. For Pete's sake, he had like the sweater tied around his neck and everything. I'll butt that. Pretty darn good coach. So yeah.
Come on, give it to him now. Okay.
It was like, okay, fine. Yes, I hope for his sake and for the Lions' sake, because I actually would like to see the Lions do well, just because in a very childlike way. like their uniforms, and I like their and I like Ford Field, and I like and I've had blood relatives in Detroit my whole life. My mom lived there for
See, there you
27
go,
years
everybody.
before-
It doesn't make a difference. Even if you're a sports guy, a sports writer, you love the uniforms. See, there it is.
I like Dexter Bussey, daggone it, and Billy Sims, and Lem Barney, and I want to see the Lions. I don't like any franchise to be crap forever.
Except the Cowboys.
So
I'll agree with that. Bravo, and the Giants, and the Jets,
yeah,
and Tampa Bay, and the Lightning.
Tampa Bay?
Hell yeah, man! I'm a Bruins fan.
Oh, I thought you were about the Bucks.
No, I'm talking about the Lightning.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay. Let me have my hockey one.
But it's still a weird hire. It's still I know they love the opening press conference. Yeah, great. Tell me what you got going on for the coordinators. Tell me what.
Ooh.
I did like there was one part I read an excerpt from his press conference where he said, "Look, one thing he learned in New Orleans is we're going to work our best matchup. If we know you can't, you're not covering, you're covering our best guy one-on-one, we're going to throw to that guy until you stop covering him one-on-one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If the off-tackle play to the left we can pound you that way, guess what? We're going to pound you that way 10 times and then throw play action off it, which I actually kind of like, because there's nothing drives me crazy more than football coaches trying to make it too complicated and to prove how smart they are.
Well, that's the John Gruden method.
Come on, what did Bum Phillips say about Don Shula? He said he'll take hisn and beat urine, and he'll take urine and beat hisn.
Right. But you mentioned coordinators. The Lions just hired a coordinator that is very highly thought of to run their defense, a guy named Aaron Glenn, who Jacksonville was very interested in getting. Urban Meyer wanted him very badly, from what I read today, for the defensive coordinator position at Jacksonville, and he goes and signs with Detroit. So that's a victory already for the Lions, at least as far as coaching personnel goes. Now, playing personnel, they've got issues. They got to figure out what to do with Stafford. They've got a bunch of other headaches they've got to deal with.
Okay.
But that's one good thing for Dan Campbell. You can say that he snatched somebody away from another guy in the NFL who wanted him.
Like I said, we're overtime here. Hey, fastest 60 minutes in sports overtime. One thing I want to make sure that we get in here, because we blew out half the schedule, but I want to make sure we do this. And this comes down to a football thing, and we talked about the Dolphins, so I want to make sure to measure this. Recently, there has been a story about members of the Miami Dolphins, the players, who have gone to a member of the Miami staff, the Miami media, and they have given this Dolphins beat reporter anonymous information on how they feel about Tua and how they don't think he's the right quarterback and how they think that he shouldn't have been given the job for next year. Gentlemen, there's already a problem here with this locker room, because in my mind, if you got players who shoot their mouth off to the guy who covers the team anonymously, you've now taken a shot at the head coach, you've taken a shot at your starting quarterback, you have proven that locker room is already a mess. Brian Flores has got to find out who these clowns are, and he's got to do something immediately. Because love them or hate them, the New England Patriots, that was the thing about the Patriots that made them great during their great times. You shut your mouth, you play the game, you keep it in the locker room, and if you've got this kind of problem coming out of the locker room, it's only going to fester and get worse. There's a problem there that's got to be addressed.
Well,
they're not
go ahead, David.
Good enough to have that problem. Like there are other teams there are teams. No, there are teams we've seen throughout history. I'm in my NFL history mode every January and December, old NFL film stuff, and just wallow in the 70s, 80s, 90s. There have been teams that have been good enough to survive that. The Dolphins aren't, and the Dolphins aren't there yet. They're not close to being there yet. And yeah, even though it's our outlet, that benefited. And they talked to Aguero.
You see, I wasn't going to say anything. I was just going to leave it. I was going to leave it in the ethereal mist as to where it came from.
If he hadn't said it, I would have. I mean, there's a couple of things wrong with it besides the obvious ratting on your teammate.
Thank you.
The team has already said this is our guy starting when the season begins. They have come right out and said, look, and they actually need to do that. If you're going to put up a high draft choice like that, who did have some good results. I look at the Arizona game in particular as his best game by far. Yeah, he sucked against Buffalo. There's no doubt about that. Buffalo happens to be a rather good team. And he's had some games where Fitzpatrick had to come off the bench. I think that's a luxury, not something to be depressed about. But they're giving him every opportunity to succeed or fail, which I think is intelligent.
Yes.
You put the effort into draft. I mean, and by the way, this is the same city. Oh, we got a tank for Tua. That's all that matters. Oh, the Dolphins lost. That's great.
There it is.
People were mad when they started getting hot in Flores' first year because, they're going to screw themselves out of Tua. God, what the hell are they doing? They're winning games.
That's what makes them want to look. The Miami Dolphins fan base might be loyal, but some of the worst fans I've ever known in my life. They're some of the biggest front runners ever, and they always jump on what's going on now in social media. Oh, we got tank for Tua. Oh, Tua sucks. Oh, we got to get Fitzpatrick. But the problem is, and I think David hit it on the head. You're not that good to have a bunch of players from within the locker room spitting all over your head coach and your starting quarterback. If you guys had won 2 Super Bowls or been in the playoffs 3-4 years in a row, hey, you can say something now. But quite frankly, you guys are an average team. You're not that good yet. I know. We almost made the playoffs. Stop. It's not that good and the players aren't that good. If I'm Flores, I'm bouncing these guys off the roster tomorrow.
Well, it may depend on who they are. But to your point, Ed, if you are a winning franchise, and God forgive me for saying this word, your culture usually means you're not going to have that kind of locker room.
Right.
And you don't really have a defined leadership structure in that locker room. With the Patriots, that was easy. It's Brady. By the way, with the Bucks, that's easy. It's Brady. You'll have these problems. No, seriously. Who's going to crap on? If he says something, you should listen. So, and there are other franchises in positions like that.
If Rodgers says something in Green Bay, you listen.
Exactly.
End of story.
And so on down the line. There are certain players in certain cities, quarterbacks or not quarterbacks, who have that kind of cachet and have that pull. The Dolphins do not have anyone like that. They do have some veteran players, but they don't have that yet. Maybe that will be Tua, although he doesn't strike me as a Dan Campbell bite your kneecap kind of guy. But it might even be Fitzpatrick. And I doubt that Fitzpatrick was the source. I would love to know, and it's not professional to know this necessarily, and Armando has every right to protect his sources. But I'd love to know, did he go to them?
Or did they come to him? Yeah.
I'd love to know the genesis of the first seed that was planted. I don't blame him for writing the story. I realize it's clickbait, but that is part of the job. But you guys are right, and David nailed it. You're okay. You're ahead of schedule. You had your chance at the playoffs, by the way. If you had just won a football game, you would have been in the playoffs.
Yeah, you blew it, nobody else.
Yeah, it really is that simple. It wasn't like you needed 20 things to happen. You needed 20 things to happen to not make the playoffs.
And I think the point you're making here is, because it was Armando Salguero of the Miami Herald, who we've all known for years. David, you work with him. Dave and I, we know him. He's a friend. We've known him for decades. And he's the best beat reporter, period, end of story, covering this team. And he's one of the best beat reporters in the NFL, period, end of story. So if he prints it, I believe it. No doubt, I won't question it in a heartbeat. But that's a good point. Did some of the players say, we've got a real problem here. We want to get rid of this guy. We want to undermine our coach and our quarterback. And they went to him? Or did he just say, what do you guys think? Look, as a reporter, that's his job. His job is to continue to dig for that. That caught me in I caught a lot of heat on social media for that when I first addressed this, saying, you're a journalist. That's his job. That's not the point. The point is, as a franchise, as a team, you shut your mouth and play the game because you haven't earned the right to subvert your quarterback that is the future of the franchise. And let's not forget, they also subvert Flores on this too, because what they're doing is they're saying that, well, look, he's our coach, but we don't trust him. He made a decision we don't like. You've already made him look like crap in front of the media and in front of the fans. Shut your mouth.
I would bet, I have no knowledge of this. I've not talked to Armando about much of anything in the last several months. We move in different worlds now. But having been on that beat and having known how you wind up working that day. That's that's one of those, despite what you might seem like a separation, of this past season where you're not in the locker room every day and everything, but still there's relationships built up. You talk to people electronically, you do whatever, and then the fact that they came out, they came out and said it. I guarantee, my first thought would be, wonder how some of these people I've been talking to over the last several months feel about that. And
good for Armando. He did exactly what he's supposed to do.
And those players could have even said, "Look, I'm not crazy about this. I don't know. We don't know. But let's keep this on the real down low. Do not do this. I don't want to undercut the guy. Even anonymously. Let's see what
because
it is.
You have. I mean, that's my whole point. You have, whoever these players are, you have shamed your coach, a guy who has really done a good job to this point and is trying to rebuild a franchise that he was handed that was junk bonds, quite frankly, for a long time and badly managed. So he's doing a good job. He's trying, and he's got a level of success, and now you basically kneecap the guy. So
Dan Campbell is the guy who kneecaps people. Let's get that. You know what? It's no different in some ways than an office workplace where you have office gossip, except when you're talking around the copy machine or the coffee break room or texting during, in the office itself, it doesn't go to an Armando Salguero or a David Neal and doesn't get out on the air or in social media. This is an office workplace that has people reporting on gossip, and that's what this was. But again, I don't blame Armando for writing the story.
No.
He has every right to do that, and it is newsworthy.
Hey, let's put it this way,
Dave.
Dave.
A crack.
If he heard the news and he got this and he didn't report it, that would be wrong. But that's not the kind of reporter is it. That's never been the kind of reporter that he is ever.
He has to run with that information, and by the way, it went national. So it proved that there was great value to that. It wasn't like the rest of the NFL media went, that's not newsworthy. That's darn right it's newsworthy.
If the players are stupid enough to think that they're going to tell Armando and he's not going to tell anybody, that's another thing to consider. Because
I'd like to think they aren't that dumb.
Come on.
Not again. Different era. Different era. I'm
going to say the players knew what they were doing. I'm going to say obviously they knew what they were doing.
And that makes it even worse. Worse.
And they knew Armando was going to write this. And because I think I'm going to bet he called mask. I don't think they went out of their way to make their opinions known, but they were asked their opinion and they gave it. And I think I'm going to wager that's what happened.
If you want to be a championship team, I don't care what sport it is, whether it's high school, college, pro, whatever it is, you shut your mouth, you keep things within the locker room because that's your sanctorum. And I think we've all covered enough teams over the years to know that the really great teams, there's outliers, but the really great teams and the franchises that succeed, it's in the bubble, baby. It's we don't tell anybody, we don't share anything of what's going on. And that makes for a winner.
And the other thing is we are in the fastest 79 minutes in sports is that
what are you counting or something? Are you out of coffee?
It just happened to look. The other thing is now, while Tua works on his body in the offseason, while he works on the playbook, while he may be working on throwing and working on certain things that they suggested he do, he now has to carry that in his backpack as well. The fact that he's going to have to go back in there when they do their gym classes in the summertime, if they do that before they actually have training camp and I would assume preseason games, he's got to impress that locker room all over again. Here he comes in as the number high pick, early first rounder, hope of the franchise, tank for Tua, does an okay job after getting the job in midseason. Not a great job, but not a horrible job. Wins some games, gets replaced. We know the whole story. And now he's going to have to win that locker room all over again.
Well, but there's another part to that though, because not only does he have to win the locker room over, but if you're anybody, you're going to walk into that locker room now as you would walk into an office or any place else, and you're going to wonder, who the hell said this, and who now do I have to fight, and who's the person that wants to fire me, basically wants me out. And now, holy crap, you've got all kinds of psychology working here now. I mean, we don't know if he's going to ask anybody, or if somebody's going to tell him, but he's now got to worry who's against him. And that's even worse if you're a guy, if you're supposed to be the leader of a football team on the field, and now you got to worry that one of your offensive linemen doesn't really give a damn about you and would like to see you out of here and see somebody else in here. Holy crap, especially somebody protecting your left side or your right side, depending on what it is. Wow. It's the Dolphins soap opera. We can't get away from it.
Danny, Jimmy.
For those of you who don't know, that could start a whole nother show.
I had two VHS tapes of 62-7 that I used to that I would play like a few times a year, just because that game released us from that. My ex would come into the room. It's April. Who's playing? Oh wait, okay, I see. Okay.
Dave is right though. Danny, Jimmy.
Oh my
God. That was a divided locker room right there, bro.
Oh my God, that was a terrible locker room. But again, there's a great way to talk about it. When Jimmy Johnson and Dan Marino were going at each other's throats, everybody knew. It got out.
That's true.
Nobody was in there to say, shut your mouth and calm down. Shula would never have allowed it. It never would have happened under Don Shula.
Different era, though.
I know.
The media changed. The 24 hours. When we started, we didn't have to worry about 24-hour sports. We were it, bro. I mean, our afternoon radio and morning radio and all the stuff that you and I were doing, that's all there was. It would be interesting to see that 40-year-old Don Shula in today's media cycle. I think what he'd be is a snappier Bill Belichick, which would be hellaciously entertaining, by the way. You have to factor that in. As Danny started, the media had blown up by that point. We already had our 24-hour stations. We had a little bit of a proliferation of the ones until some of them fell by the wayside for whatever reasons.
The good thing about that whole idea you made between Belichick and Shula, if you were to mix the two together, I could still see Shula standing, and because Belichick never gives anything away. No. But just one time, I'd love, and God bless you, Coach Shula, one more time, I'd love to see him standing there at his podium at the press conference and somebody asking him a question, or not asking him a question, but making a statement that they wanted to think was a question, and have Shula go, was that a question? No, really, was that a question? I mean, if that's a question, you could put it in the form of a question, and I'll be happy to answer that. But if you'd like to ask a question, ask a question. That happened, and I know the guy it happened to.
What the hell kind of question was that? Was another one that had happened? Or the all-time favorite, when you had your 1 day a week availability of Don Shula, which was Monday if they played a Sunday game, and Tuesday if they played Monday night, was 3:00. Drop the puck. It's starting, which is one thing I love. Ed, you and I are crazy about starting things on time.
Yep.
He would walk in there. We'd all get up. We'd stick our mics in there. And it didn't matter who walked in at 3:02. He knew. So if that person dared to ask a question, he would say, well, if you had been here earlier, I already answered that.
He's right.
It was awesome.
Belichick's got a little of that. When I covered the Patriots for a few years, he has a little of that too, where I did hear him once in a press conference say to somebody, well, I already answered that question.
Yep.
That's it. And just moved right on.
That was part of Shula Bingo.
It was a brilliant era.
What the hell kind of question was that? I already answered that question. If you'd been here earlier, or, great training for us. Because he expected the same thing out of us, the three of us, that he expected out of Bob Greasy and Bob Kuchenberg and Mercury Morris and Dan Marino and so on down the line. Don't come in here half-assed. You be prepared for me, and I'll give you good material. By the way, he was a great interview. He really was. But don't come in here unprepared because I don't have time for your crap, Val. I'm busy.
David, you never dealt with Shula, did you?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Actually my first, I came down here in '89. I interned, was an intern that summer, and that summer I sort of wound up almost like the de facto Dolphins backup writer, and so I dealt with Shula quite a bit. And first few years actually, I was at the Herald. But definitely that first year, it was almost daily, and it was a little weird. I mean, how it is. You're 21 years old. You've grown up watching some of these guys, and you've grown up watching Don Shula, and then someday you say something like, sorry, Coach Shula. Hey, Dave, how you doing? Huh? You know my name.
Well, but then you knew you were accepted.
Yeah.
Right. And it was. But I always had the idea just simply you came prepared. If there was something said that I didn't quite get and that I thought, this is going to be one of those questions. Let me get the clarification from somebody else. This is not a clarification that Don Shula is here for.
All I will say is, and because we're gonna come back, I'm gonna get you guys back on again. We're gonna tell all these stories and all the things we didn't do because this has been a tremendous amount of fun. The story that I alluded to a few moments ago from the reporter, and I believe Dave knows exactly who I'm talking about, and I will not out him by throwing out his name here.
You'll have to text me.
Okay, who consistently asked questions in the form of statements.
Oh, now I think I know.
And who never asked a question. It was always, what about, no, wait a minute, I'm sorry.
No, talk about. Okay. Ed, save your fingers. I know who you're talking about, so to speak now.
Talk about the offense in the second half. Talk about Marino's performance. And that's with the one time I think Shula just had it, and that's when he said, is that a question? Is there a question in there? Because there's a question. I'll be happy to answer the question. But if you're making a statement, so if you could ask a question, that would be better. And he turned, and he went to somebody else. That reporter didn't ask a question, I swear, for another 3 weeks. Didn't say a word, not a peep. He knew that he'd had it.
You know what? Sometimes silence was your best strategy. There were Mondays
absolutely.
that I remember standing, and I'm standing right next to him sometimes because, we had to get that microphone close by.
Hold the
and
mic.
If I didn't feel like I had anything to offer, I wasn't about to get my head chopped off for the sake of sport for everybody else in the room. I'll just, look at my tape recorder to see if it's running. And thanks, Coach.
Look, the electronic media, we were cowards. The radio and the TV guys, because we had our mic there, and we let the beat guys do it, the newspaper guys who were there, and they always ask the questions. Okay, let them
Well, they got the rule was they got first go, and then the rest of us could take what was left over on Mondays. Now, after a game, that was different because everybody's under deadline pressure. We were, TV were, obviously the writers were. So that was a different world back then. But I'll say this about Shula. He was honorable. I remember sometimes I used to have to get stuff for the Monday night radio broadcast. So I would go to PR and say, look, CBS needs these 3 questions. Not 4, 3 questions.
Yep.
And so Harvey Green, who's the PR guy at the time, would bring Don Shula over to me in a separate part of the parking lot at what is now St. Thomas University, and I would ask my 3 questions. I never asked a 4th question because there was no 4th question. When he knew there was 3 questions, that's what he was going to answer. But he answered them, and he answered them professionally and thoroughly and courteously. And at the end of the 3rd question, whoop, he was gone, and that was fine. But that's honorable. That's honesty, which certainly nobody ever called Don Shula a liar that I could think of.
We could go off and we could tell all kinds of stories about our experiences and the people now who cover teams. This would be another show all in itself. But the people now who cover professional and college teams and have no freaking clue what they're doing. They don't know the background. They don't know the history. They don't do their homework. And every single time I watch one of these press conferences and I hear what is a stupid question, I cringe. I'm going, okay, you really didn't know what you're talking about, so you're trying to guess, and it's going to be bad because I dealt with Shula for so many years, and then I dealt with Belichick. So between the two of them, it was always pretty much the same thing. But we'll have to tell stories about that just one day, and we'll just do that.
Go
ahead.
I gotta go. I got a daughter waiting for me.
Okay, well, see, I was just going to do that. Okay, now that we've had the fastest 90 minutes in sports, let me remind everybody again of how to get a hold of everybody. For David Neal, you go to Twitter. It's at David J. Neal. You go to Instagram, it's at Natalia's Dad, and that's why he's got to go, because Natalia is standing back there going, "What the hell, Dad? Our afternoon walk is here, and you're screwing around with a couple of guys talking sports. Jesus, God, what's wrong with you?" And for Dave LaMont, Facebook is at Dave LaMont, Twitter is at Dave LaMont1, and Instagram is at Dave LaMont. And I also need to point out as well that Dave also has the Nooner that he does on Facebook. So just go to his Facebook page at noon, obviously, of course, and you can check it out.
Yes, Mondays and Fridays, and thank you for that. And I'd like to invite David to appear on the program also, if he can make it sometime. I'd love to have you. And I don't have as nice a set as Ed, but I'm a lot nicer guy. So I think you'll have a good time.
I can do Fridays, especially because I'm off, and it can be very entertaining at noon on Friday.
LaMont,
we'll be in touch. We'll be definitely in touch for sure. I'd love to have you, especially since I haven't done anything yet about hockey. So
you're gonna pay for that one somewhere along the line. You're gonna pay.
You know, Ed. You
right
know I love you.
In the heart. I know.
You know I'm right, but I love you, and you know.
Goodbye, Dave. Thanks so much.
Friends for?
David, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show. Dave, thanks for being a placeholder.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate everybody joining us here on Sports Pulse. Don't forget, you'll find out here in a couple of minutes. Well, you've learned all about this. Go to the podcasts and find The Man in the Arena. Go to YouTube, find Man in the Arena. That's where you will find all the shows, and you can catch us there. So for my guests, David and Dave, including the guy that used to be one of my closest friends in the world, thank you so much for joining us. Be well, be safe. Rock on, true believers. I'm Ed Berliner. Until next time, see ya.
You're still here?
Are you not entertained?
It's over.
All right, hey. All right, good job, guys. Let's just not come in tomorrow. Let's just take a day.
Go home.
I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Go.
That's all, folks.